Okay. So, hello, Ray.
Hello, Lucas.
How are you doing?
I am doing very well. Thank you for asking.
That's a very British answer, as expected. Thanks for agreeing with having this interview. And
I'm delighted to have this interview. It's about my own favorite subject, which is myself. So that's fine.
That's always good. You're also I guess with a very particular theme, I would say.
Yes.
Yeah. So you're.
I wonder if it would help, Lucas, if I just ran through the organizations that I am connected to and what each of them does, because that'll make sense of the answers that I then give.
Yes, but let's avoid being too specific in the beginning. So maybe even more general. So can you just tell us, especially because this is going to be an interview with a special theme, can you just give us a short introduction of who you are, very simply?
Simply.
Yeah. Okay, that's gonna be challenging, but
all right. I am a queer tango dancer who thinks and sometimes does things that are not dancing as a result of thinking.
Well, that's a clear answer. So so you're specialized in queer tango?
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
I started out as most men who dance tango start out in tango, mainstream tango, and that's how I started. And I had no idea that this thing called queer tango existed.
Oh, really? Okay.
And I did the classic of learning how to lead, because that's what men do. And I was leading, as you know, in the perfectly conventional way. Throughout my adult life, happily, I've lived as a transparent gay man. It's who I am. So when I would go to milongas, I wasn't pretending to be a straight man leading women. I was a gay man leading women. And it was most enjoyable. You know, I think everybody has their tango conversion moment story who dances tango, and I have mine. And essentially, I had a very good friend who'd come through a divorce and who was not in a good place. And she said, I want to learn salsa. I've nobody to go with me. Will you come with me, Ray? And I said, yes, of course I will. And for 3 years, we did a bit of salsa, which was fine, quite fun, you know, okay. We go to this salsa weekend on a place in Britain called the Isle of Wight. It's a very pleasant little holiday location. And it just so happened at this salsa festival, there was an 18-year-old man from Colombia who was giving tango classes. And I thought, oh, I'll go along, I'll see what it's like. And even now, sorry, it's my lovely clock. Even now, I sort of struggle to describe it, because what happened was, within 20 minutes of the beginning of that class, I had this powerful sensation. This is my dance. This is my dance. And it was, you know, it was just so obvious. And I didn't know where that had come from. Needless to say, in the next 6 months, the salsa ended, the tango started. And I've been devoted to tango ever since. The queer bit, that emerged oddly. I was at a perfectly ordinary tango milonga in East London, really lovely one that I'd been going to for a year or so. And then suddenly on the dance floor, I saw 2 men dancing together. I don't know why it had never occurred to me that that was sort of possible or desirable. And I suppose at that stage, all I knew about tango was what I'd seen on dance floors. And I had not seen 2 men dance together. And the effect on me was electrifying. because I thought, wow, I can now connect up the me, you know, the gay man, and this dance that I am passionate about. And it was, you know, I went over to them, talked to them, and and then eventually found out about Queer Tango, found out that there was somebody in London called Tim Flynn, who was trying to get Queer Tango London off the ground. He started that in 2008. And each time he tried, I'd go along and try and help. And then eventually he put that on a stable footing in a gay bar in South London called Barcode. And from 2011 onwards, it opened on a weekly basis. And I went on the first night and I never left. And I'm still part of Queer Tango London. Is that all right to be going on with?
Yes, yes. Yes, actually, I have several questions about that, but
go ahead.
Yeah, but I thought you wanted to first name a few organizations that you thought were important.
Oh, I thought I wasn't allowed. Sorry, I will do it.
Yes, but you mean, yeah, okay, yes.
Okay, so professionally, most of my life, I've been an academic. I've not been a dance academic. I've been an academic in art and design, the history and theory of art and design, which I taught to designers. But I felt that as time went by, you know, my reputation rested on my knowledge of the history and theory of art and design. I'd written a book on Henry Ford that's an absolute standard work. And that's where my reputation was. And I could feel that, you know, in the daytime, I'm being Dr. Ray Batchelor, PhD, MA, brackets, RSA, close brackets, FRSA, art and design. And the rest of my life, I'm being this tango dancer. And I had a very good friend who actually professionally advises people about their careers, people with creative occupations. And she said, you and I need to have tea. We need to talk about this. So I said, look, I'm being pulled apart. I'm being pulled apart. I'm quite good at the design stuff. I still enjoy it. I'm still interested in it. But I'm doing all this dancing stuff. And I can tell it's massively important. What should I do? And she said, bring the dancing into your work. And it was the perfect piece of advice. In the university I was working at the time, they were desperate. They were a new university and they were desperate for people to do research. So I invented some Queer Tango research projects. The first one that I invented it together with a really wonderful, okay, so there was a student who became a student officer. So he was like, for the student union, interested in raising the standard of teaching. And so was I, and we worked together a bit. And he was just going to leave university. He was doing a sports degree, so not my discipline at all. But he was leaving, he was going to work in Sweden. And I said, I tell you what, when you get there, why don't you invite me to come and I'll teach your footballers how to dance tango. And we laughed and laughed and laughed. And then we put it together as a research project and we got £10,000. So the Queer Tango Football Project, it was originally called, and we went to Stonewall in London and said, we want to do this. And he's a football coach, okay? That's what he's good at. Between us, we covered a lot of tick boxes, if you like. So for my part, I'm old, white, male, gay, and he was young, black, male, straight. So, you know, we were very, very different people, but we got on really well. And so we launched this project and we did it. When we went to Wembley, to the headquarters of the Football Association, their advice was, and this is a measure of the times, they said, you'll have to drop the word queer. All right, so it became the Football Tango Project. There's various, if you Google that, there's videos about it out there, work that we did. That worked for a while. The second one was, again, work with another colleague. I had a colleague who was into the social sciences, and she and I got on really well. She was profoundly deaf, really very deaf. She even had, I don't know if you know such things exist, she had a guide dog for the deaf, that came with her everywhere. And I was doing a presentation about my Queer Tango research. And because she didn't have somebody to come and type it out as I was speaking, she asked me if I'd have coffee with her afterwards and explain what I'd said, because she could lip read then and do it. So I was explaining all that, and she said, I'd like to learn the tango. And I said, okay, we'll try it. So I got we call them in English a boogie box, or at least in the generation that I belong to, they were. So we got them sound system. She came, her dog came. And apart from keeping the dog out of the way, it sort of worked, because I could hear the music, and I could, if she, providing she was following, she could not hear much. She could hear a little of the music, but she got an account of the music through my body. And ever willing to turn things to our advantage, she said, there's a research project to this, isn't there? I said, oh, definitely, yes. So we put an application together, another £10,000, fantastic. And so we did Deaf Can Dance, and we ran a series of workshops with deaf people, teaching them tango, queer tango by default, because then you don't have to worry about this many men and this many women. You get everybody to do everything. One of my specialisms is taking a room full of people and who have never danced and giving them an introduction to tango, enough that they can walk musically and intelligently with someone else around the room in the ronda after an hour or two. So I don't claim I can teach people tango in a couple of hours, but I can give them enough of a sense of what it's about for them to appreciate what it can do. And the thing that the possibility that it held out, this research project, was that it meant that deaf people who historically thought, I can't go to a tango ball, I can't hear the music. And actually, deafness is just like blindness, in the sense that it's not blind sighted, it's blind, a bit sighted, slightly sighted, So what was a surprise to me, but not actually to my friend, is that we ended up with two people, both of whom were deaf, dancing together. And actually, that's just an extreme version of what happens in normal tango. If I dance tango with you, say, and I hear the music the way I hear the music, you hear the music the way you hear the music, and between us, we produce a dance based on our collective understanding of the music. This was a more extreme one, where maybe somebody would only hear the high notes and somebody would only hear something rhythmic or whatever. Bring it together and dance. So that was a good one. I did another one. Hang on, I'll run out of these eventually, don't worry. Where I used it with another colleague at work to get people interested, people who are in management, interested in the idea of leadership and the thing they never talk about in management. You've got endless books about leadership, how to be a good leader, all of that. They've got almost nothing about how to be a good follower in business, because there's no status in saying, oh, I can be led, I can be useful. That is not something you're proud of. I am a great leader. People are proud of that. So we did this project where we taught managers to dance tango, okay, queer tango. And the beauty of that one was you could talk to people endlessly about leadership and followership. You could do it endlessly. We didn't talk to them about it. We took a room of people and got them to lead and follow to tango music in the ronda. There's an objective to get everybody to move to, and you make some rules. You say, you're not allowed to do an inquest on this, all right? If it doesn't work, just stop, start again. So we take the language out, all right? And then we get people to reflect on it afterwards. And the really striking thing was there was a gender divide. There was a gender divide, because the women who've been compensating for crap leadership throughout their professional careers, you know, are doing it again in the dancing. And in the dancing, when we did the inquest afterwards, they could say, these are the things I valued in a leader: clarity, continuity, stability, you know, those kinds of things, a willingness to accommodate, to yield, to pick things up after an error had been made. And then they could talk about the things they didn't like in a leader, like being pushed around, like being treated like, you know, whatever. So all of that stuff, and no, we didn't have to say that much. We just did the workshop and then had the conversation afterwards. That became a chapter in a book and is still available. So those are sort of the research stuff that I've been doing. A word or two about the Queer Tango project. You might have some questions. Perhaps you want to ask me some questions. Do you want to ask me some questions?
Well, the order is a bit random. Has been a bit random until now.
Okay.
So I guess you should just continue.
I'm happy to do that.
Introducing some more
yes,
broad points, so to say.
Okay. I am part of the Queer Tango project. The Queer Tango project is a very grand name for a colleague of mine in Denmark, in Aarhus, and me. That's the Queer Tango project, and every now and again a third person as well. It varies who that is. The Queer Tango project exists to stimulate debate about queer tango. You haven't asked me, but I'm going to ask myself now the question that people always want to know. So, queer tango, how's that different from mainstream tango? And the answer I'm going to give you is my answer. Not everybody agrees with it. This is my answer. It is the same dance. Okay, it is absolutely the same dance. The two things that are different about it are that conventions about who leads and who follows, men, women, are discarded. They no longer apply. Anybody can do any role. The other thing that distinguishes it is that changing roles, individuals changing roles between dances and during dances, so intercambio, the business of seamlessly changing role as you're dancing, is one of the things that marks queer tango out. The other thing that marks it out is that if you go to a milonga and you dance and then go away, that dancing may have social and political consequences. It's unlikely anybody intended that mainstream milonga would have social and political consequences, but it may have them. The difference in queer tango is that we have an overt agenda of things we want to change. So we are trying to, sorry, it's the lovely clock again. So we're challenging assumptions about gender and sexuality, and we're very deliberate in how we do that. So just to give you an example, there are local queer tango organizations like Queer Tango London, you name it, there's queer tango everywhere, pretty much. And then there are international events, festivals and marathons. One of the ones that has existed for the longest time is in Paris, and it's called La Vie en Rose, very Parisian. And it's wonderful. It's, you know, it's really, really enjoyable. In terms of its social and political effects, and it's not peculiar to La Vie en Rose, this happens with many international events. We have people coming from all over the world to come and dance there. I come from London, which is socially quite liberal. I can explain to you at some point, if you want, how attitudes towards men dancing together and women dancing together have changed in the time that I have been dancing. But it's a very tolerant atmosphere, and I dance very comfortably in London regularly, queer tango. At these international events, you may get somebody who comes from St. Petersburg, St. Petersburg in Putin's Russia, where homophobia is standard political fare in terms of the sort of nationalist rhetoric. I went once to a festival in St. Petersburg, and when we would dance, they wouldn't put up where it was going to be publicly because they were afraid that the thugs would come and beat them up, essentially. And when we actually went to a mainstream milonga, where we had been invited by the man who ran the milonga, we arrived, and there was nothing particularly that marked us out. There were some young men incredibly beautifully dressed in a suit, okay? A suit and high heels. They were very elegant, and they were beautiful dancers. And we danced. And there was this very noisy intake of breath and going on at a couple of tables in the distance. And eventually, this group of people, they got up and, you know, saying all sorts of things to us in Russian, stormed out of the room. The manager of that milonga immediately came over to us, apologized for their behavior, and then this was inspired. He danced with each one of us so that everybody in that room could see that this was his milonga and that we were welcome in it. But do you see that people come from very different contexts? And what it means is, if you come to an international event like La Vie en Rose, you are confirmed in your identity, both as a tango dancer, but also as a lesbian, as a gay man, as a trans person. You know, it has that social and political effect. Another way that the politics works is they have, I mentioned La Vie en Rose particularly, they do something they call, in that cod English that foreign people love, the city walk, okay? So we do the city walk. What this means is they take a sound system and we go to different places in Paris, the back of Notre Dame, on the Pont Alexandre, whatever it might be, and we dance together. And what happens is people are going by and they go, oh, look at that. And they get their mobile phones out and they go, nee, like that. And then they send it to their friends and bingo, you know, you are communicating. You're doing stuff just by being there. And it works. I'm convinced it works. All of that feeds into what happens. In terms of that social and political agenda, in the time that I've been connected with Queer Tango, it's widened. It was all about gender and sexuality, with good cause. There was some real battles to be had there. But there is somebody who I cannot speak too highly of. His name is Edgardo Fernandez Sesma, and he is in Buenos Aires, and he is the most influential queer tango activist in the world. And he is that because of his deep commitment to using queer tango to achieve social and political ends. And so he's pushed it much wider than gender and sexuality. He still does gender and sexuality. He organizes flash mobs that suddenly appear in the streets of Buenos Aires, and each dancer has on their back the name of a country where LGBTQ people are in danger of being beaten up, of being tortured, of being murdered. And that, you know, so people see them dancing and think, oh, why are all those names on the backs of the dancers? So that works. The one project, and he's, you know, I can't begin to give a catalog. I could give you a catalog of all his projects. I'm not going to. I will mention one more that had a profound effect on me. He has, because Argentina has pretty much a sort of rubbish economy and a pretty rubbish political arrangements, it lurches from crisis to crisis. People often find that their fortunes fluctuate, and suddenly, you know, they have no money, as it may be the case. What was happening was that the social services that should have looked after old people were failing them, absolutely failing them. And the families that you thought might have been able to look after people were outrageously sometimes just dumping old people. They were just ignoring them because they didn't want to be bothered. And it was a scandal. It was a national scandal. And Edgardo started this milonga for adultos mayores, for old age pensioners would be the English expression. And these, I'm not sentimental about old people. Old people are just like ordinary people, only older, and facing a slightly different set of challenges. But Edgardo yes, I will tell you this story. He invited me, very kindly invited me to come and help him teach at one of these, and I was honored to do that. It was, the milonga was held in a building that had been built as a naval base, okay? And before we went in, I knew this background, but Edgardo explained it to me. If you can imagine arriving at a set of buildings, all painted white, very, utilitarian, functional buildings. And he explained to me that under the generals, during the military dictatorship period, the entire naval base had been used in order to torture people and to murder them, okay? And he explained these rooms here, this is where they tortured people. This square is where the helicopters would take off with the women who'd given birth to their babies. And they would go and fly out over the sea and push the women out of the helicopter to get rid of them, okay? The people who came to this milonga, they knew all about the background of this building. And under Kirchner, one of the presidents of Argentina, a famous one, he said, we're going to take these buildings back. We're going to use them for things that enhance life. That's what we're going to do. So the people that I met there, they knew what those buildings had been used for, and they were there and they danced tango. And they danced tango extremely well, even within the physical limitations that they had. One of the things that I learned there, or rather I had confirmed to me, because it started to dawn on me, and that is the business of how you, and this is fundamental to tango, you must dance with the person you are with. I know that sounds obvious, but sometimes people have ideals about who they should be dancing with, about the type of person they should be dancing with. Once you've taken to the dance floor and you either have somebody in your arms or someone has taken you in their arms, you have to put all that aside. All that is ego. You have to put it firmly aside. You are now with this person. I danced with a woman who she was just 11 weeks away from having a hip replacement, okay? And she was in pain. She asked me if I would dance with her, and I did. And the business of just noticing what we could and could not do was that, we weren't doing much in terms of tango, but it was at a very high level of, I'm touching my ears, listening, noticing who you're with and being with her. And I was really touched at the end of the dance when she thanked me for dancing with her. Because, it's just such a hard thing. Since then, one or two of the people who've been connected with that have maintained a little bit of Facebook links with me. And on the occasions when I'm lucky enough to go to Buenos Aires, we meet up again. And I have the most enormous respect for them. And I can see how the work that Edgardo is doing changes their lives, really changes their lives. And it would be fair to say that, I'm not going to reproduce what he does. I'm in London, I'm in a different set of circumstances, but I do want our dancing to change things. I've made it that Queer Tango London has a strap line, and it's the name of a paper that I gave a while ago, and it's called Dancing to Change the World. And essentially I'm arguing that for, real full-on queer tango, there should be some very clear objectives about why you're doing this, what it's for. And just before lockdown, Queer Tango London had arranged with a Jewish community center in North London to do Jewish tango meets queer tango. And it arose because one of the countries I know reasonably well is Germany. And I spent quite a lot of time in different places, particularly in Berlin. Since the queer tango stuff, there's a very famous, very good festival in Berlin. And each time you go, you have these reminders of the history of Germany, including the dark things. And there's these things called Stolpersteine, which you may have seen them. They're little sort of brass plaques in the pavement that you notice as you walk on them. And they're the names of the people, the Jewish people who lived wherever they were. And it gives their dates and which of the concentration camps they were murdered in. And because of that, and the fact that not only Jews, homosexuals, gypsies, people with disabilities, all those people were herded into the concentration camps and murdered. We know that. So there ought to be an opportunity, I'm just steering away from that sun, there ought to be an opportunity to make links and say to the people, because there's a rise in anti-Semitic attacks, there's a rise in homophobic attacks. In the course of my life, at the beginning, I thought everything was just going to get better. No, it's not. You have to fight and fight and fight. And so we wanted to make links with people who were risking persecution. Unfortunately, COVID kicked in and that project is on hold for the time being. Ask me some questions.
Well, there has been a lot of information. Let me think. Well, one of the things I was really surprised about in the beginning is that you said you didn't even have like the slightest idea of queer tango being possible while dancing tango conventionally. So
yeah,
I actually find that very surprising. And when so from during what years were you actually like a bit like that? That's something I would like to know.
All right, I started dancing tango in 2003, so it's coming up for 18 years ago. And I stumbled on these men dancing together, probably in about, I'm making this up, I don't really know, maybe 2006, 2007. And then I linked up with Tim Flynn in 2008. And yeah, I didn't even know that there was a term, queer tango. I didn't know it existed as an entity. There was just my ignorance. I was starting from knowing nothing to knowing the things that I just picked up on dance floors. And a lot of the stuff that I've done since then has been to try and make our knowledge of those things more systematic. So I sent you one of the ebooks that the Queer Tango Project has published. Queer Tango History is Making a Start. Bizarrely, I think, it's the clock. That should stop the clock. I love them, so I'm just going to let it go. As far as I know, and there may be a Spanish-speaking one out there that I don't know about, I am the world's only historian of queer tango, okay? I hope I'm wrong. I hope there are others out there. I haven't found them yet. It's a bit of a responsibility, but I want people to have a sense of where this thing has come from. And I want them to see its relationship to mainstream tango. This is right now, this stuff is completely of the moment because in the United Kingdom, we have a program called Strictly Come Dancing, and everybody knows it. On a good day, would you bear with me a moment? I'm just going to stop the washing machine. I'd even forgotten it was on. Can you hear it?
Okay, yeah. No, I can't hear it, but it's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Dundee, the cat, he's not interested in us. So the business of men dancing together, it's been a part of mainstream tango history. The world is full of imagery, historical imagery of men dancing together. Women dancing together, yes, but at the moment I'm just talking about men. I'm being deliberately, sorry, right, now I have to put the hat on. There is, so, meh, where to start with all of this? It's so interesting. I find it so interesting that I could give you a good hour's worth. Okay, I'm shutting it right down. Just at the moment on this TV program, Strictly Come Dancing, it's called Dancing with the Stars in other countries. For the first time, and about bloody time, they should have done it years ago. They have two men dancing together as a competing couple. And so suddenly, the popular newspapers are full of it. Social media is full of it. You cannot move for, oh, they're doing this, oh, they're doing that. Oh, are they lovers? You know, all of that sort of stuff going on. It is mainstream popular news. And of course, what it means is that suddenly they actually want people who know something about men dancing together. Knock, knock, who's that? The BBC. Oh, really? Okay. So last Wednesday, Queer Tango London spent an afternoon with the BBC with people dancing together, and then they very nicely interviewed me. And it's not for a program, it's for the news. So they're getting their news package together so that when John Waite and Johannes Radebe win, or when they get kicked out, they'll have a package ready to go about and I'm delighted to say that they've made use of some of the historic imagery of men dancing together that appears in that book, Queer Tango Histories. And just this morning, I had confirmation that a chapter that I co-wrote with a fine academic called John Mulholland, as a result of a paper that we gave, is coming, that the book is now published with that paper in, and bingo, they've put the men dancing together on the cover. I could not be more pleased. So it's called, what's it called? Oh, something and popular dance, cultural memory and popular dance. And it has the tango dancers on the front from 1909, from the Loria market when it was being demolished in 1909, and all the market traders are posing in tango poses. It's a beautiful, beautiful picture, and it's on the cover of this book, which is coming out. I'm so pleased. It's nice to get a real book now and again. Yeah, so all of this stuff is feeding into the narrative on mainstream tango and where that relates. So it's all moving. It's very interesting times.
Yeah, so that's actually like a totally separate topic, because I'm always very interested in history, tango history, and but this is a separate part that you really need to explain today, because I think people are lacking a bit of context in that. So why don't we just start with that immediately?
Okay.
So you were talking about these this imagery of like past photos, man dancing or at least posing.
And women and trans.
Okay.
I'm completely focusing on men at the moment because that's the news story. But in terms of Queer Tango Histories, Queer Tango Histories is an anthology of academic papers that I have presented at international dance scholarship conferences, and they've been getting better. I'm starting from zero knowledge, and I've been, researching, learning more, and I thought it would be useful and not very costly to draw them all together and publish them as an ebook, which I've done. And yeah, so a relationship between this queer tango. Okay, so this is the thumbnail version of queer tango history. All right, and this is me doing the diagrams. Men have danced together, women have danced together ever since the beginning of tango in the 19th century. Okay, by and large, the men have got more. There's more imagery of men, and that's partly because of, you know, famously in Argentina at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, you have a population that is young, that is immigrant, and is predominantly male. It's mostly men, because the men have come from Italy, they've left Maria behind, they're going to come back, rich men, and marry Maria. They get to Argentina, they may or may not get rich, they never go back to Maria. So you have this strange gender bias in Argentina towards, there are about 7 men for every woman. And what this meant was that if men were going to dance, they would have to dance with one another. There weren't other people to dance with. And they didn't have those sort of hang-ups that we tend to have, or our contemporary society has, about men holding one another and dancing. They just, you know, it's a different world. They are comfortable doing it. That is salutary for us to look at now. If you look at these images, what you see are young men perfectly at ease with themselves, dancing. Sorry, something going on there. Dancing, or more often posing, because the photography meant that you had to sit still, stand still rather, whilst the camera was taking the images. So that's an essential part of the background of queer tango. There are bits of tango history that got erased. This account that I'm giving you is slightly coarse, all right, in the sense that I know there are some other things that could be said, but we'd be here all day. This is the coarse version. For much of its history in the late 19th century, tango was the dance of the dispossessed. It was people on the margins of society, very poor people. That's not universally true, but it's substantially true. To the extent that, you know, famously, the brothels mythology, which is desperately suspect. Lucas, you must know about this, that essentially there is scholarship, and then there's the things that people say on dance floors. These, you know, these sets of beliefs, mythology. And one of them is, oh, yes, tango, it started with men dancing together. And that contains a grain of truth. But the actual history is much more complex and more interesting. So there were quite a high level of homosexual men working in prostitution, working in the criminal environment, and they would dance together. So there has been gay men dancing together for a long time. And there's all those images also historically. And so there are at least 2, possibly 3 strands of tango history that when tango moves from being this rough thing to being this smooth thing that embodies our Argentinian national identity, you can't have homosexuals and lesbians dancing together as part of its history. And all of that was erased. If you think I'm making this up, there's an excellent book by Magali Saikin, 2004. It's in Spanish and it's in German. I don't speak Spanish, but I can do a bit of German. And it is very, very good because it uses the evidence to demonstrate that this was true and also to demonstrate how that history was eradicated for the purposes of reinventing tango as national identity. To give you some idea of the change, the Argentinian ambassador in Paris in 1913 issued a statement, because tango was becoming really popular in Paris, saying, I want everybody to understand that tango has nothing to do with Argentina. Nothing to do with Argentina. It was brought into Argentina by foreigners, and we reject absolutely the idea that it has anything to do with our modern culture. Okay, so he was serious about that. And that attitude had a long history. And then eventually, you know, pretty soon after that, it becomes, this is an embodiment of our national identity. And not only our national identity, our heterosexual identity, okay? So you've got all these images of men posing together. What are they doing? This is when the mythology kicks in. Oh, yes, yes, yes. They used to dance together, but obviously they were just dancing together so they could practice and get better at it. And then eventually, you know, dance with a woman and then maybe later fuck her. You know, it has to be turned into a heterosexual narrative. It's a bit, yeah. Anyway, the truth is more interesting than that. I recommend to you Queer Tango History is Making a Start, where I can go on about it for several hundred pages. The other history that gets eradicated is the Black African Argentinian history that's so much a part of tango history and which is now much more widely recognized. Yeah, so that was another thing that had to be got rid of because that didn't fit national identity either.
Yeah, so how do you know, how would you know that like obviously there were, for example, gay people out there dancing for pleasure, apparently,
Yes.
or just for fun. I mean,
Yes.
But how? So how would you know that these like the men in the pictures were comfortable with like dancing with each other? Because I mean,
well,
but yeah, because you know, you can kind of assume that from watching the pictures, but this was also very much a macho society, also in the lower, like it was not just the government trying to impose some kind of national identity, but I'd say that people were also way more conservative in general than they are nowadays in Argentina, for example.
You have to be, but yes, you're right to hesitate about imposing meanings on what one sees. To some extent, if we're academics, we speculate. If we're ordinary people, we guess. Okay, it's the same thing. This is the evidence I would point to. There are so many images of men in tango poses together that, you know, there are literally hundreds of them, probably thousands of images. To take a photograph at that period, you have to make an effort. You know, it's not just sort of done. It's not like that. So these people have agreed that they will be photographed like this. So that photograph of the market traders at Loria Market was being demolished so they could build the Congresso, Piazza Congresso. And so the photographer from, in the work that I did, I worked out which magazine, I think it was Caras y Caretas, so a popular magazine of the time. The photographer comes with his equipment to take a very wide photograph of all these men, and all these men, you know, if they didn't want to be seen in tango poses together, why are they standing up like that? And they, you know, just literally their attitude, they're looking, you know, look at me, look at us doing this. That's all I can, that's the only evidence I can point to. And time after time after time after time, the men are wearing their best suits. They're, you know, they're out for a good time and they want a record of them being like this. The other type of photograph that comes up again and again is football teams being photographed. And you can tell it's a football team because there are 10 players in 5 couples and somebody missing who's taking the photograph. Okay, you count the bodies and you go, oh yeah, another football team. There we go. So yeah, it's speculation, it's guessing. We can't ask them. We can't know, but we can guess legitimately.
Yeah, but what would be the in the background? What would be the historical pointers, so to say, as to why, for example, people trading on the market? Why? Yeah, I mean, I don't suppose they were all gay. I mean, that's not very usual. But how? Yeah, but like it's kind of understandable that even if it's a myth, that people came up with this idea like they were just practicing.
Yes.
But you're essentially saying, for the people who haven't read the book, like you're saying that these might have just this might have just happened for fun without any like judgment about like nowadays in football, for example, like you dance tango with a man, you're gay or something.
Exactly.
And that's supposed to be an insult, but apparently that's in those times. So your argument is that this was more than just posing or
I recommend one chapter in the book, which is called Queer Tango's Image Problem. And it's about this stack of imagery. And I take the dance floor myth, you know, the one about, oh, they were just practicing getting ready to dance with women stuff. And I go through every alternative possible explanation. The chief one of which is they were having fun, you know, they were having fun and they had no hang-ups about it. And it probably wouldn't have crossed their mind that anybody would think that they were gay because they were dancing with another man, okay? So they were having fun, and there's one or two other suggestions. And then last is maybe they were gay, okay? So if you've got that group of men, I don't know what the statistical, you know, occurrence of homosexual men in a tranche of the population might be, but yeah, there's going to be one or two in there probably who are gay, and who probably enjoy it in a different way because they're gay. But I'm not for a moment saying, look at these hundreds of gay men. The world was just crowded out with gay men. No, don't be ridiculous. You know, these are heterosexual men at ease, and the fact that they're at ease should be instructive to us. The attitudes that we have now, they have their roots in this moral panic that occurred in Western society and particularly in America. A moral panic about gender and sexuality. The war, the Second World War, had thrown all that stuff up in the air. So women were driving, they were doing all sorts of things that conventionally they would not have done. There's that famous image of Rosie the Riveter, you know. So gender and sexuality is a really hot subject there. And out of that came this moral panic about the threat of homosexuality to society. So, and we're still, you know, we're still just still pushing back all of that stuff. And it's in the woodwork. It comes out every now and again. But that had not happened when we go before the Second World War, and you get these men perfectly ordinarily dancing together. Even if you go on YouTube and look at some post-war Argentinian video clips of dance teachers, men, doing a display for a milonga and dancing together and you know, and just showing off like crazy. Nobody looked at them and thought, oh, I expect they're gay. They didn't. It's just, you know, it's a different thing. And I think it's incredibly healthy and useful for us to remember that there are ways of being together that are relaxed and at ease.
Yeah, maybe also an element in this is that I think I've read the chapter you mentioned, but I think there's also something cultural that like a lot of these Argentinians who were in the photos are probably of Southern European descent, or maybe of native descent, or even of African descent. But they're from a culture, whether it's Argentinian or Italian or Spanish, that is at least more at ease with like male friends, for example, hugging or touching each other, or giving it even a kiss on the cheek, and they're still being straight or not, but it doesn't matter. But here, for example, in Northern European culture, it's pretty unusual for men to touch each other if they're and they're probably way more what's the right word for that? They're like they're
inhibited.
Yeah. So they're afraid of like it's always like. Well, I read this article once that like there was a woman who in America who a journalist who dressed up as a man. Like literally, she dressed up as a man just to investigate how men usually behave among each other. And she said it was much harder than I expected. I always thought that women were at a disadvantage, but once I am like a man, I feel like I constantly have to defend my masculinity towards other men. Whereas, for example, what I like about Queer Tango is that you can just do whatever the hell you want, and it doesn't matter. Like I hate this whole like I'm not involved in politics like you are, like but it's also always something social, like societal, that I've hated, that you're always supposed to be defending yourself from seeming gay or something like that, like it's a very yeah, it's a really deep macho culture that I've also experienced, for example, in high school. Like I feel like the worst thing you or like middle school and high school, that's the same school here. Secondary school, like you like possibly seeming gay or something was the worst thing, and you know that was in like the late 2000s. But I mean, this is a modern society, and still these it feels like you know, if you're gay, you get this label, and then it's kind of okay, you're tolerated, but it's still you're still like something. So that's kind of a point that you might see in tango as well. That
I think you're absolutely right.
Yes.
I want to give you the most bizarre example of this, which I come back to this program, Strictly Come Dancing, and these two gay men dancing together, competing, okay? One's a teacher, one's a celebrity. And they've been doing all the different dances, that's what they do. And they got to the Argentinian tango. The dance was choreographed for them by a very well-respected London tango teacher, Leandro Paulu, okay? I've been to his classes. He understands tango very well. But for the Argentinian tango that he got them to dance, he got them to do the thing about it being as if it were a fight, okay? Because men, they can touch one another if they're fighting, all right? But they can't just, well, they can. Anyway, I thought it was sad that when it got, they did a very good job. These two men are excellent dancers. And they, you know, it's really good that all this is happening. And I absolutely appreciate why Leandro will have done what he's done, but I regret it. And interestingly, they did other dances, and they did a dance, they did the rumba. And it almost moved me to tears to watch it, because it was, and if it had been a heterosexual couple, it would have been unremarkable. It was two gay men loving each other through the dance.
Just like normal people. And
you got it, just like normal people.
Yeah.
And that's what, you know, that nearly made me cry, because you don't see that represented in show tango. Okay. The other thing that they did with the Argentinian tango, that's the safe option. And it should be redundant by now. Yeah. But it's not.
No, it's not.
Anyway.
So that's I have a lot of questions about this, but okay, maybe tell some more about this football project.
Okay.
About, it might sound quite random, but it's actually linked to what we just discussed, because
so with the football tango project, in the event, we never managed to break into professional football. It was too tough. Okay, and I think that's a measure. Well, you know, in professional football, they exist to win matches and sell clobber and make money, and I understand that. So they're unlucky. Anyway, we never broke into that. What we did was we did it with a number of football teams, mostly connected with charitable organizations. But the idea is that my colleague, Jack Badu, excellent football coach, okay? And I took him to some milongas, and we did a bit of dancing together, and some women danced with him. And so he developed football drills, football exercises based on tango, okay? And so what we do is we'd have different roles in the workshop. My role was to get everybody to dance with one another, leading and following. And in football, you know, you must be familiar with this. If a goal is scored, they're just everywhere, all over each other. You know, it's absolutely fine to touch one another, to kiss one another. It all, you know, da da da. What they're not quite ready for is you say, okay, so now we're going to do the embrace. And I'd like you to offer your hand, and then with your arm, just pull your partner towards you until you're touching here. This is not allowed. Okay, do you see what I mean? This breaks several taboos quite a lot. And you don't have to explain that it does that. You can see it in their faces, you know, it's like, oh God, we're not supposed to do this. But they're doing it, and they do it, and they, you know. And the thing that we found, because we would alternate between me teaching a bit of tango and Jack doing some football drills. And the moment the football entered the room, because we were tending to do these things indoors, the moment the football was there, everybody relaxed. It's like, you know, suddenly physically, they're just much more relaxed, and they're doing these things. So if they're doing it and it involves a football, do Google it. You know, there's YouTube clips there of some of the exercises that he did. Then suddenly they're all right. It's fine. It's okay. But then, so we do this, and the objective of the workshop was that we would have two outcomes. One outcome would be to dance a complete tango in the ronda, even if it was just walking, without stopping, without talking, and without laughing. That's setting the bar quite high, okay? Because you discharge your unease by laughing, by, you know, taking it seriously, whatever. No, we're going to do this. So that was getting them to do that, all right, which for them is tough. And then the second outcome would be a football match, where between two teams with a football, where each player was two men in a tango embrace, okay? And so they had to operate as one. And if they let go of each other, the other side got a penalty. Okay, so they had to hold on to one another. And we did both of those things, and it was great fun. And then we'd have a discussion about gender, sexuality, and football afterwards. And it was very interesting to hear the things, what their experiences, you know, outside of the workshop had been of those kinds of things. But those workshops worked really well, and we did them for several years. We haven't done any for quite a while now. But that was, yeah, it was really great piece of work, and it opened my eyes to another way of using queer tango to try and achieve social and political effects.
Yes. So that's what you're most passionate about, I guess, in the end.
No.
Okay.
Not the answer you expected. The thing I'm most passionate about is the dancing. I've just done a book chapter. Which one is it in? God, I get confused. I keep producing stuff. Where, oh, I know, yes, it's going to appear in a book which should appear in next year. What the question I ask myself in this chapter is, do queer tango dancers take to the dance floor with the intention of achieving social and political change? No, they don't. All right, that isn't why they dance. They may think about it beforehand, they may analyze it afterwards, but when you dance, what you want is that, you know, transcendent whatever it is that everybody knows who dances tango well enough. That's what you want. That's why you dance. That's the thing that drives you forwards. And then in queer tango, we reflect on what that may mean, but we don't reflect on it while we dance. If we do anything other than dance, we're not doing it. You know, we just dance. And that's wonderful. And for me, although I want all those other things to happen, and I do care about them, at the core of it is exactly the same thing that any other tango dancer will feel. That you want that, you know, we'll use the word, we haven't used it yet, and we should, connection. We want that. That's what we want. And then everything else comes after that. The idea that you could take to the dance floor and try and change the world is just rubbish. But the idea that you can tap into that and see how thinking about it might change the world, that's useful. That's good stuff.
Yes, and that's actually what I've missed so far in the interview. So it's good that you ultimately mentioned it yourself, is that where you have all these things going on, like well, being a historian pretty much, but also perhaps being an activist. But in the end, you shouldn't forget that it's also just a hobby you do for fun. So
yeah, don't use the word hobby. Don't use the word hobby. It trivializes.
Okay, passion.
Passion will be
better. Lifestyle.
A hobby is something that people who have no lives do to fill the time until they die.
Yeah, I guess that's true. But whether you call it it's still something you do for fun, right?
Yes.
Because otherwise you would only do it for a function. But you also do it because you want to feel passionate about something or connect to people, and maybe also doing something social. Yeah, so that's the thing that I yeah, that might require some further exploration here. Like what does what effect does tango have on you, and especially the liberty of being able to dance queer tango, like these things. That's the direction I'm looking for.
Okay, let me steer you towards this way of thinking about it. Conventionally, if you want to engage in politics, if we set aside for a moment war, which is the most extreme version of politics, and move back into dialogue, representation. Those are the conventional ways of conducting politics, using language and imagery. If at the moment, particularly in gender and sexuality, the language is fraught. It's, you know, so LGBT, LGBTQ, LGBTQ plus, you know, it's just ripe for collapsing. It's not doing its job. And the debates have come to blows over trans issues. I'm not going to express a view on any of that. I'm just noticing that the debates were almost ground to a halt. If running alongside language and imagery, you pursue politics through dance, the beauty of that is when you step onto the dance floor, I don't step onto the dance floor and have a t-shirt that says gay man, all right? I've stepped onto the dance floor. I've left the label over there. I'm now just me, all right? And whoever I'm with, whatever label they might potentially have, straight man, gay man, straight woman, lesbian, trans, whatever, they leave those labels aside. And we then engage through the connection in this beautiful dialogue, potentially beautiful dialogue, where there is no language. Oh, that could be my book arriving. I wonder if it is. Just a moment. I just need to go.
That's fine. That's fine.
It would just be too wonderful if it were my book. I mean, it's not going to be, is it? I'm just being interviewed by a man in Holland. I'll be free, I think, about 20 neighbors. I gave her some food and she wanted to return something. I think I'm to be the beneficiary of something delicious very shortly, but not for 20 minutes. So we're all right. Okay.
That's great.
Okay. So language, debate, dancing. There are things you can do in dancing that you can't do with language and debate. Miraculous, wonderful things. So somebody can know me and I can know them in ways that language will not wholly accommodate. If you could do it in language, you wouldn't need to do this, okay? But you do this because it does that thing which we can't describe. And if you want a word for it, let's call it the transcendent. It's that thing that happens in tango dancing, and potentially it's immensely powerful. But I can't necessarily describe how it's immensely powerful because that would be to go back into language. Watch this space, I'll write something. The chapter that's coming out in 2022 begins to explore that, but I realize I'm right on the edges of it. There's a lot there that needs thinking about. I don't have to be the only one who thinks about it.
But you personally, like, when you like on a random milonga, like what does it make you? Why do you keep coming back, especially to queer tango? What is like without any political effects or social effects? What is the?
I think it has political and social effects anyway. I think all dancing has social and political effects. I'm just, as a queer tango dancer, more alert to what those might be and more likely to refer to them, to highlight them, or whatever it might be. To give you a for instance, there is a milonga in London called Tango Terra. I've written about that a little bit. I love it. It is my favorite milonga in London. And I've been going to it for several years. And I love it in part because in the course of an evening, I will dance with straight women. I will dance with women who aren't straight. I will dance with straight men. I will dance with gay men. And I will be, I can be either role with any of these people. It might be that a straight woman leads me, say. So ultimately, I'm just enjoying the dancing. I am just, somebody out to have a good time. But I'm not, I'm sufficiently alert to realize that my going out and being available in those ways alters things. It changes things. And it changes things for the people that I dance with. And they are in the process of changing things too. And they know that they are. One of the men that I dance with there has only one arm. And we do this, our sort of wacky dance, where we sort of compensate. He's been doing it all his life. And I have learned how it is that we can dance a tango. And he will be led and follow and lead. There's a bit of me, I said that nobody takes to the floor and thinks about the social and political side of these things. I have caught myself before now whilst dancing with him thinking, watch you people, just watch this, see this. This is an example of inclusivity. This is what queer tango is all about.
Yeah, or the deaf people in your course, like your what you were referring to in the beginning. That you sort of included deaf people to being able to dance tango. I mean, that's pretty similar, right?
I have now the Queer Tango Futures, Dancing for Change in a Post-COVID World is the second book that I refer people to, and in there I've started to push to the limits the idea of inclusivity. There is a section in that book called I Danced with a Trump Supporter. And so what I'm doing there is saying, we say we're inclusive, we're all really inclusive. And of course, we're sort of inclusive with the people who it's nice to be inclusive with. And I understand that. I want to push the limits, and I want us to dance with the people who are the opposition. I want us to know the opposition. I want them to know us. I think that may have some effects. We'll see. But I want to push the inclusivity thing to its limits.
Yes, because that's less obvious.
It is.
Yes.
It is.
Yeah. It's very safe to stay in your own space, but
yeah. Look at me, I'm doing something virtuous. Aren't I marvelous?
Yes. Oh, that's what a lot of politics comes down to, right? Like people are just looking for affirmation within their own circles, but
some of it can. But I think we're wrong to be skeptical about. There are plenty of reasons to be skeptical about some politicians, but there are also people in politics for the right reasons who are trying to change the world for the better. And I think we need to give those people respect. If we trash all politics, we end up with Trump. That's the truth of the matter. And we end up with our crap prime minister, a complete 100% gold-plated idiot. Because people think, oh, he's quite nice, he's a bit fun. It's like, it's a bit more important than that. Sorry. Anyway. Lucas, if you wouldn't mind, I think I'd quite like to stop now. Is that all right?
Well, that's very direct, but that's good. That's un-Englishly direct, but that's fine. Like, I always have more questions, but it's totally
I'm sure
okay.
you do. I'm sure you do. I can't help feeling if anybody's made it this far into this recording, they deserve a break.
Okay. So not even just a slight bit.
Go on.
Well, actually, the last thing I'm really curious about, because I tend to ask this to everyone in one way or another. Like, what do you specifically like about Queer Tango in Buenos Aires in Argentina? Or maybe there isn't anything you specifically like? That's also fine. It's a bit of a suggestive question, but I would say go ahead.
Say it again very precisely.
Okay. Yeah, I'm speaking with an academic, so I know I have to be.
You do.
Yeah.
You do.
So, is there anything special about Queer Tango in Buenos Aires, which is ultimately the source of tango, which we've also extensively talked about in a historic sense? Is there something special maybe about it, something you want to say about that? I mean, the answer can also be no, that's also fine.
There are many things that I love about Buenos Aires, and I have the deepest respect for its tango history. I have a respect for its queer tango history too. There are arguments about where queer tango started. I don't think Buenos Aires is the most significant place in the world with regard to queer tango. I think it has some of the most significant figures, of whom I've mentioned Edgardo, Mariano da Campo, Augusto Barizzano. These are really important people. Queer tango has a more complex history, which fortunately we don't have time for now, but Europe plays a really major role. North America in terms of the development of academic ideas about the queer. And that's, I've written about that too. That's in there. So yeah, I love to go to Buenos Aires. It's one of the places in the world I am most interested in, and there are people there that I regard as friends that I like to meet. But it's a long way away, and it costs, and now we're trying to save the planet, and I don't know how many times I should be flying there. Yeah, we'll see. Unfortunately, your last question, to do it justice, would take another hour and a quarter, and or is it an hour and a half? And I'm not sure that I can do that. It's a contested area, and as somebody who is not Argentinian or Uruguayan, Uruguay gets overlooked all the time, Montevideo, that really important places. I'm going to hesitate before expressing a very, very clearly articulated view on that, because it upsets people. It upsets people who, yeah, I'm stopping there.
Yes, yes. Well, that's obvious. That's clear. And well, thanks for your many explanations, so to say. And well, it was very pleasant to talk with someone who's so articulate about and well researched about yeah, about a rather specific topic for many people. I mean, if you look at it more closely, it's not as specific, but for a lot of people, it's just this category of some people doing something that they're not doing.
Yeah.
So it's always good to spread a bit of awareness about.
Quite so, and thank you very much for inviting me. I flippantly said at the beginning that it was about my favorite subject myself, but actually it is about my favorite subject, which is tango. And it's been a real privilege to be able to say some things at some length. I'm grateful to you.
Yes, you cannot always you cannot go in depth about everything, and that's fine. But I think this was a very nice attempt at joining some things that are, yeah, it's I see this clear like this line of thought, or this line of in the what you've told. So well, thanks a lot, and well, maybe see you on the dance floor someday.
We should dance together. I should like that.
Yes. Well, bye for now, and have a nice day.
You too.